Hey guys, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks. I've got a real treat for you here today. Basti378, who is one of my longest YouTube subscribers. I checked out his YouTube profile and I was amazed to see that he liked some of my videos over 2 years ago. So thank you so much for staying with me, Basti. And Basti is playing in the one, the only, the Tier 10 German heavy tank, the E-100. Or shall I call it the HD 100 now that it is looking better than ever with its full HD model. So the E-100 has the biggest gun on any heavy tank in the game. Well, I guess you could argue that the KV-2 has a slightly larger caliber gun because it does get 152mm, but the E-100's AP shells do 750, whereas I believe the KV-2's AP shells only do 700. But of course, if you compare that tier for tier, the KV-2 would be higher, respectively. But that's not to take anything away from the E-100. If you get hit by this 150mm gun on the Tier 10 German heavy tank, you certainly do know about it. Now, the weakness of this gun is that its penetration is mediocre at best. It's got 235mm of penetration. And so, that means E-100 versus E-100, it's not very easy to penetrate. We can see the marker over the enemy tank is pretty much yellow everywhere. And so Basti tries to hit one of the weak points, I guess you would say, of the E-100. This top bar that you see is very flat and it's not as thickly armored. So if you manage to hit this, you can actually penetrate the E-100 with anything upwards of like 200mm and plus. Obviously, any higher you've got more chance, but that is one of the weak points that you've got to watch out for when you're driving the E-100, and also something to look out for when you're engaging one. And Basti is very well aware of it. Now, the E-100 was my first Tier 10 tank in the game. I played this thing so much, and I died so many times to IS-4s and IS-7s, unable to penetrate them with the standard rounds. And this was at a time when you couldn't fire premium rounds for anything but gold. Yeah, there was a time where you couldn't purchase premium rounds for credits. And so I didn't fire a single premium round ever in World of Tanks, outside of a few clan wars. And that's because we were paid gold on the clan wars map to be able to use them to improve our chances of winning. So Basti put in a good shot into the M103 then. He certainly doesn't want to come back out. That was a low roll and it still did 660. Well, the M103 hasn't learnt his lesson and Basti's willing to give him another one for free. Another 723 damage done there into the Tier 9 American heavy tank puts him to 4% of his initial hit points. Basti also narrowly missed a shell on the enemy E-100, who is now firing high explosive rounds. And that's quite a good tactic when you're engaging tanks with your low penetration gun. But the penetration isn't quite low enough for the 110 to avoid a death there, taking pretty much 40% of the hit points off that Tier 8 heavy. So an E-100 can fire high explosive shells, and it can also fire, did you hear the sizzle? Heat shells. These high explosive anti-tank rounds in this vehicle completely negate the 235mm of poor penetration on the AP rounds and give you 334mm, and that is more than enough to go through the front of the E-100's turret. Now, whenever an E-100 is shooting at another E-100 in this situation, you do feel quite sorry for each other. You're paying, what, probably about 5,000 or 6,000 credits for every shot. But it's necessary. I think the enemy E-100 bounced off a high explosive anti-tank shell there. But Basti doesn't bounce, confirming 1,798 damage done to the enemy. Well, his opposite number, really, the enemy E-100, the Tier 10 German heavy tank. So it looks like the M103 is still out there, and he managed to sneak in a shot without getting spotted. Basti looks like he's trying to go for some vision on his team, narrowly avoids an enemy artillery shell, and manages to bounce an unknown tank. I guess it could be a Waffenträger auf Panzervier, a Jagdtiger, even a Waffenträger auf E-100. Any of those shells could have hit. And when your armor is angled well, like Basti was doing there as he came around the corner for the tank, it's rather thick indeed. He fires blind at the bush where he thinks the sneaky tank destroyer was camping. Now, one of the key things that you have to do with the E-100, and we saw that this dead E-100 here didn't do, is he didn't angle the front of his turret. As we can see here, even though it's angled, so to say, upwards here at a slant from the surface, it's very flat frontally, and so there's no curvature, and the cheeks are gigantic. And that means if the enemy do fire premium rounds, or they've just got extra high penetration like many of the tank destroyers have, if you point your gun at your opponent, your armor is not very well angled at all, and that makes it easy to penetrate. What you have to do is angle your turret pretty much like this, not giving too much of your side turret armor, and go backwards and forwards and hope that they're unable to hit one of your weak points. Now this game may only be 6 minutes into it. Basti has picked up nearly 4,000 damage and taken out 2 tanks on the enemy team. But his team are still not faring well. They're down 2 vehicles, and more importantly, half of Basti's team now are artillery. And when the enemy team has only got 1 artillery, generally artillery aren't worth as much as enemy tanks in this endgame situation. But it looks like that T-92 just completely proved me wrong. Look at that. Ober Brockfurst in the T-92 just put in a great shot into the Jagdtiger. Some great spotting there by Basti, enabling the T-92 to finish off that Tier 9 German tank destroyer. Now this game is certainly heating up. There are 7 tanks left on the enemy team, including 1 artillery, and Basti is alone with 3 artillery on his team. The T-34 is spotted up on the ridgeline. Doesn't manage to penetrate the side armor of Basti's tank. The tracks probably helped him out a lot there, and the T-34 slips and slides his way down the slope. So Basti has now secured the hill, and that gives him a great point to defend. The only way up on the hill is this narrow pass here. If Basti's able to defend it and get his artillery working, he might be able to go to town on the remaining opponents. He puts in a good shot in there into the AMX-30. The AMX-30 manages to pen, I guess, Basti's lower plate there. Yes, look at that shell going right in. When you're aiming up at this lower plate, it is very poor indeed. A Batchat puts a fantastic shot into a Waffenträger auf Panzer IV, which allows Basti to finish it off. A very aggressive play there. But the Waffenträger auf Panzer IV puts in a great round from, I believe, his 128mm gun there. 560 alpha damage received there by Basti. Basti continues his assault. He wants to try and take them out as quickly as possible, and puts in a big round into the T-34 and bounces around from that 120mm off his well-angled frontal plate. Oh, quickly, get back, get back, get back. Oh, the AMX shaves off another 400 hit points off Basti. And while he was very healthy just a minute ago, he has certainly had to sacrifice health to put in a few good shots here. But he has been putting in good shots. A lot of the enemy tanks are on very high health before Basti had put in those rounds. Oh my word. What a roll there. 681. There was only about, I'd say, maybe a 40% chance that Basti was going to kill that Waffenträger auf E-100 there. And if he hadn't, it's very likely the Waffenträger would have absolutely minced him. Now, I really like the angling work that Basti did there. Do you see the way that he didn't just pull straight backwards? He turned his tracks into the rock, which meant that the AMX-30 was unable to get through the side armor and the tracks of Basti. And again, his well-angled frontal lower plate even there manages to evade a shot from the AMX-30, which has still got about 260mm of penetration, that Tier 9 French tank. Now, Basti was alone versus 5. After killing the T-34 and that SP-1C that got himself into a terrible situation, he is now 1 versus 3. There's an AMX-50B on the enemy team who is contesting a top gun here with Basti. Basti's got 6 kills. The AMX-50B's got 6 kills. Who is going to be the top gun of this game here? Basti's got something to say about it. He aims back for the AMX-30B and he's loaded a high explosive shell. The reason I believe why he's loaded a high explosive shell is that the AMX-30's armor is not fantastic. And he also knows that the AMX-50B has got 227 hit points left. And so all he has to do is graze him with a high explosive shell. The 150mm high explosive rounds on this tank are very effective indeed. Gosh, Basti did not aim for long there, but I guess he didn't have the time. For all he knew, the artillery would be aiming at him, and one shot from the AMX-50B into the lower plate there would have removed that buffer zone, that nice amount of hit points that he has left. Right now, he could probably take a shell from an artillery unless it hits completely flush at an unangled surface. But he can definitely take 2 rounds from an AMX-30. Now remember that Tier 9 French medium tank can also fire heat rounds. So even though Basty's got great armor in these kind of tense situations at the end, you have to consider that pretty much if you're going to get shot, you're not going to be able to pull off the soft bounces now like you could earlier on in the game. But I really like Basty's work there. And thinking about why he loaded that high explosive round, considering that the AMX-30 on the enemy team is on 934 hit points, and it's not the most heavily armored French medium tank, look at the penetration on these high explosive rounds on the E-100. Such a large caliber of a high explosive round does give a very large penetration indeed. 85 millimeters worth. And that's enough to contest probably the lower plate on the AMX-30 if he manages to hit him at a good angle and gets a nice roll. So Basty manages to spot the artillery. The artillery obviously has 6th sense as he starts moving immediately. But I think the artillery believes that Basty was coming from the west. I think he thinks that Basty went round here or went round here. And so the artillery is going to make a serious misjudgment. Basty goes back into the bush. And I think the artillery believed that Basty was coming down from the western flank. And Basty manages to connect a great high explosive shell there into the artillery. Of course, a high explosive shell there is pretty much unnecessary. He would have been able to kill him pretty much every time if the AP shell had gone through his tank. And the high explosive shell runs the risk, I guess, of either hitting the gun at the end and then not fully killing him, or alternatively maybe just completely missing and hitting the track. But I guess if that had happened, the AP shell wouldn't have killed him anyway. Nevertheless, Basty continues to choose to use high explosive rounds, and it's getting very tense here. He's on 8 kills, 8,237 damage. He is contesting a Kolobanov's medal, and he has to penetrate the MX-30 and roll good with this next high explosive round. The MX-30 makes his way up onto the hill. The MX-30 doesn't want to draw out of this game, and he realizes that he's very unlikely to be able to cap. And so he is going into this arena, this graveyard that Basty has created on top of the hill. Now Basty is unspotted. He's probably thinking the AMX-30 is trying to flank him, and he is. Oh god, he fails to penetrate the lower plate of the AMX-30 with his high explosive shell and loads an AP shell in return. The AMX-30 on the other hand penetrates his lower plate, and due to some fantastic angling there on his frontal turret, waiting for himself to reload, he is able to take out the MX-30, secure the game, pick up his 9th kill, 9,000 damage, and take down the Kolobanov's medal. So what a fantastic and pretty much flawless game for Basty here. This was an absolute masterclass of an E-100 game. Basty, you simply dominated this round. You were where you needed to be every time. You provided support for your team, and you did the hard carrying and the killing when it needed to be done. Now I just want to show you a couple of my favorite moments in this replay where Basty used the armor on his E-100 to maintain his hit points. Your hit points are your lifeblood. So let's take an example here. Basty has just been reversing in a straight line. If he continues to reverse and he's reloading right now, all that's going to happen is the MX-30 is going to come here, see his lower plate as a big fat juicy target from below and penetrate it. So instead, what does he do? He turns his tracks to the left. By turning his tracks into the left, that means that exposes the side armor and the spaced armor around his track to his opponent, maintains his health, and those are the kind of moments, it's those 400 hit points that allowed him to get this Kolobanov's medal, and these are the kind of plays that you need to make if you want to do so as well. And there's another example right at the end where he exchanged that final shot with the AMX-30. By angling his turret here, it doesn't matter if the AMX-30 has got 330 millimeters of heat penetration, perfect angling can still use the frontal turret armor of the E-100 to weather the storm. If he hadn't angled his turret here and kept it flat, I'm pretty sure the AMX-30 would have been able to go through the frontal turret armor of the E-100 here. And that means no 9th kill, no 9,000 damage, and no Kolobanov's medal, the one that everyone wants. Basti, thank you so much for sending me this replay. It was absolutely awesome. Let's just take a very quick look at the post-game stats. So Basti picked up the Spartan medal for that tight bit of angling there at the end, the Radley Walters medal for getting 8 or 9 kills, a high caliber medal for doing the most damage in the battle, a steel wool medal, unsurprisingly considering he survived, and the one that everybody wants, the Kolobanov's medal, for standing alone against at least 5 opponents, a serious feat in a tier 10 game. To be able to carry this game, Basti had to do 5 times more than anyone else on his team was able to do, and get 1,615 base experience points. Absolutely preposterous, including 2,000 damage, I guess, upon detecting for the artillery, and also a little bit of detracking. Well, actually, no detracking, so that must have been completely spotting for his own artillery. And he was only 4 seconds away from getting a Defender medal as well, when he shut down the AMX-50B on the enemy team, who was able to still pick up a Top Gun medal, so... sorry, Sakis, it wasn't quite your game there. Through using almost flawless angling technique like I highlighted in this video, Basti was also able to block 3,680 damage via his armor, making the potential damage that Basti received 5,810. And because Basti wasn't going gung-ho on the heat rounds, he still made 42,000 credits profit. Basti, thank you so much for sending me this replay. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And thanks again for staying with my channel for so long. I really appreciate it, Basti. Thank you very much. And if you guys enjoyed this replay too, please consider giving this video a like down below. It really helps the channel out. And click through up here if you are struggling to play your heavy tanks like this E-100 and you want to see it played on Prokhorovka. I give a few tips and you can see a monster round in there. I think I'm playing in a platoon with Ike as well. It's a lot of fun. And let me know in the comments down below what you guys think about the Tier 10 German heavy tank, the E-100. Was it your first Tier 10 heavy tank? It was mine. Gosh, must be about 3 or 4 years ago now. And if you're a long-term player, do you feel like its usefulness on the battlefield has diminished with time? Or do you think this is kicking just as much butt as it used to? Anyway, as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.